Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this special edition of SCM Live. It's on the radar. Today we've got two experts, Steve Serio and Philip Richter. They have picked out 6 cars from auctions that are upcoming, land-based auction companies. They're going to tell us why they picked the cars, the condition of the cars as they can tell from the catalogs, and exactly what price range they think these cars will hammer for. Steve, let's start with you. What's your first pick?
Well, going into the auction catalog, first of all, I've got 3 cars coming from David Gooding's auction at the postponed auction from April to this September at Hampton Court. I think it's interesting that he's having an auction live. He's kind of being the first guy that, we look at between RM Bonhams and Gooding's company to jump back in it. And it's a phenomenal collection of cars. So it was tough to pick 3, but the first one I picked was the 1955 Lancia Aurelia B24S Spider, which personally for me, having sold, I don't know, about 7 or 8 of these things out of the 181 or so left-hand drive cars that were made over the years, it's always been a dream car for me. I was always attracted to the shape, the engineering. I think it's a classic car to use on any rally at any time. I mean, it really is, to me, the ultimate Lancia from a period. Before you get into the later rally cars, from the 70s and 80s, and really those cars that make you feel like your hair is on fire when you're driving them. I could see this in any one of a collector's sophisticated collection.
So
great cars.
Tell us about the history and condition of this car, at least as related by the catalog and what you can determine.
Yeah, no, it's got a full history, which is always good. It was sold last by Lucas Hooney, who's got a fantastic reputation in the collector car world. Lucas rarely deals in things that are not of the highest quality. He's always a big presence at Retromobile, and he's just a guy that's been in this for multi generations. And from what I can tell in the pictures, being the dark red that it is, kind of a maroon color with a tan interior, it seems to have all the right things checked in all the right boxes. And these cars are notoriously difficult to get right if you don't have a good one to begin with. They're not things that a lot of people can work on. The suspension, the transaxle, especially the braking system. I mean, it's all very complex, and once set up is incredibly rewarding to drive. I mean, they're not the fastest things in the entire world, and you have to get them going. But boy, when they're going, they handle beautifully, and they feel like a car from the mid 60s, not the mid 50s.
Steve, is there any indication of recent use of this car, events, tours, things like that?
I don't think so. So I think with any of these cars, I think in the whole Fabry collection, I mean, he was or still is a collector that top of the food chain guy in Europe. And I imagine his cars were well maintained. I mean, that's kind of it's not such a leap of faith. I mean, I think anybody who buys anything at an auction should understand that put aside 10% of what you spent on the car for another 10% of investment to make it right if it's not right. But I have to believe that this car is 95 to 97% of the way there.
Where do you put this car price-wise?
Well, they haven't been trading at the $1 million+ they used to. And I think this example, although a good color combination is not the best color combination, and I think with a limited audience there, it's somewhere in the $800,000 range. I mean, the catalog puts it at 700 to 900,000 pounds because the auction is in the UK. I don't see it. I see very low estimate here, unless, and this is why I'm so curious to watch this auction, unless this really kicks off a little bit of a boom in what's getting sold this year. I mean, frankly, a lot of good cars are getting sold this year. The pandemic has not slowed down people spending money, and I think this auction is going to be a real barometer. It's going to be a real sort of moment.
What was the peak for these cars? Didn't they hit $2 million at one point?
Yeah, there was one that did that, restored in Southern California by the one guy that can restore these cars. And Bonham sold it. I believe it was black with green. The same year I had a black with tan car at RM. And yeah, they were kind of tapping the $2 million mark because you could spend five or $600,000 restoring a bad one. But that was a little bit of an outlier and timed perfectly at the height of the market. I think most of them over the years have sold for between 650 and nine. A handful of them did over a million, and I certainly sold a couple of them over $1 million. But I just don't see that anymore. And when these cars come down, it drags everything else in the Lancia world from that period down with it, which is now why you can buy a B24 Cabriolet for $300,000 and why you can buy a Coupe for 250. And I mean, the whole Lancia world is eclectic to begin with for no good reason because they're phenomenal cars. But this
So
is the top of the food
let
chain.
me ask you this question. As a dealer, at what number would you want to put your hand up to own this car for inventory where you think you could resell it?
700. And then it's worth taking a risk. And I don't see it selling at that unless I don't know. I should probably look in the auction catalog if everything here is no reserve. I don't think it is. I think everything's got a reserve. But at $700,000, you take a shot and you go, okay, there's a little downside.
Okay, Philip, your first pick.
My first pick, I believe we're going in the reverse order of age. So it's the Zagato Alfa SZ. There are two currently for sale, two very interesting cars for sale. Gooding has one, and RM has one. This is the Gooding car that we're looking at here. This car...
Philip, this car is for sale by private treaty. It's not coming up at their auction, correct?
That's right. I'm sorry. In fact, both of them are, I believe, private sale, as well as the RM car. This car is... look, I'm on a Zoom call here with two of the biggest experts in Alfa, and here I am trying to talk about Alfa. So you guys both have forgotten more than I'll ever know. But I had a really great experience with this car at Chantilly with Keith when we were there 2 or 3 years ago, Keith.
Right.
And there was a fantastic SZ there that I showed for the two ladies who brought it, who drove it, I think from Germany, to the show, and they couldn't show it because they were judging another class. But that's how I got to know the car and fell in love with it. And it's the kind of car that you have to see it in person to believe it. It's the result of, and Keith, maybe you could give more details, but it's a result of an accident in the late 50s when a famous race driver wrecked his Veloce, and they rebuilt it with this body style. And then they only made 200 examples later in 1960.
So, Philip, of the two cars that are for sale, why did you pick this one?
I picked this one because this one has a really, really interesting history. Its last known race was in 1961. Then the car virtually disappeared for 30 years. It was in Texas, and it's just only recently resurfaced. And there is a documented history on it, but it's not been seen by the public for over 3 decades.
What's the current condition of it represented to be?
It's in good condition. I don't think it's not a 100-point car, but it's ready to race. It's ready to go. It was repainted in red about 20 years ago, but it's ready to do rallies and ready to go. I think realistic valuation is over $500,000 for this car.
So I'm going to jump sideways for just 1 second because I have Steve right here who's been dealing with a lightweight Sprint. Steve, I'm going to go off topic. Lightweight Sprint versus Alfa SZ. Not far apart in value. What do you pick?
I've always liked the lightweight Sprints because of their histories and because of the way it's so hard, much like this car, to find a good one. This shape never did it for me. And the added value, these are always, a couple of bucks more. I just never warmed up to them. I can't say why. I like the Lancia Sport Zagato. I like. We're going to talk about the Aston DB4 GT Zagato in a minute. Um, I think this is an iconic shape, but just not for me. I'd be curious to know what color it was before it was red, Philip. And it's good to say it had been missing for 3 decades in Texas and not South America, because then I want to know who rebodied a normal car into a Zagato. So that's one of
So,
those.
Philip, you're picking at what number would you put this car in your garage?
Me, myself?
Yep, you yourself.
I mean, if I could get it somewhere in the fours, I think I would buy it.
Okay, moving on.
Obviously, we can talk to David Gooding about the provenance of this car, which I am pretty highly confident it's good.
Right. Steve, next car.
I think we're going to the Aston Martin DB4 GT Zagato, one of 19, and this one being in left-hand drive, if I'm getting the order right.
How many left-hand drives were made?
Oh, I should know this off the top of my head. It's almost split down the middle. Boy, having sold 2 of the left-hand drive cars before, I want to say that it's 12 and 7, 12 left-hand and 7 right-hand.
So what attracts you to this car? This particular model, this particular car?
Well, I saw that car at Retromobile when David was displaying it, and I've known this car. It is the condition of this car. This could be, if I was going to, there are 2 Zagatos I would want to own. It would either be this one or there's a black car with different details on it. And this particular car has survived magnificently. I mean, it has really stayed as it was. And I think, excuse me, this is a right-hand drive car. Talk about a flake for a moment. I would take this just the way that it is, drive it, wouldn't do a thing to it, and just completely and utterly use it daily. I mean, if I had the deepest pockets, this is my favorite Aston. The DB4 GT Bertone Jet is my first pick. This is my second pick. And within the top 3 of specific cars, this car is just an amazing condition car. And if you wanted a Zagato, they don't come up very often. They kind of sell in spurts. You can't find one for 2 years, then one will sell, and people will say, "Hey, that's a lot of money. Maybe I'll sell mine." They kind of hit the high watermark of about $14 million, $15 million a couple of years ago for the street cars with no history, no race history. It's the best shape. I mean, I think it's just a glorious thing.
Steve, the lightweight Sprint has a hair trigger feel to it compared to a regular steel Sprint. Is the Aston Martin Zagato have that same edginess and sense of excitement over a standard Aston?
Not over a standard DB4 GT. No, it's why they didn't perform well against the 250 short wheelbases in period. They were compromised. I mean, to think of it as it's funny. This was another car that was an utter failure when it was launched because it was too much money. No 2 were alike. A lot of people didn't get it. Took them a long time to sell the 19 cars. But yeah, no, if you closed your eyes, you wouldn't know the difference. It's kind of like the difference between a 206 Dino and a 246 Dino. There's no real difference, but I just think it's the best automotive shape. And I've always been an Aston guy. It's what started me in the business. And I think, again, this particular car is just survived magnificently.
Where do you peg it, Steve? What's your guess on current market value?
I can't imagine it's much above 10. It's $500,000 on either side of 10 million, which is a staggering amount of money for 99.999% of the planet. But these things don't trade hands that readily. And I mean, the first one I sold was just about $1 million 20 years ago. And then I sold one for $4 million 10 years ago. I mean, so you can see how they just went and went and went and went. And I got to believe this is still somewhere. Yeah, I got to believe somewhere around $10 million.
So
and the only thing.
If Steve, if they were 12 to 14 Does that make this a value buy at 10, or is that just the market?
I think it's just the market today. Again, my faux pas earlier, just from forgetting, the left-hand drive cars generally bring more money. They bring a little bit more, so that's going to hold this back some. Not that there aren't plenty of people in England that would love to have this car, but there's a lot of guys that have right-hand drive DB4 GTs who would rather have a left-hand drive DB4 GT, and it's probably true for the Zagatos as well. That's the only thing holding it back, really.
Let's move on then. Philip, what's your next car?
My next car is a 1934 Chrysler Airflow. This is a love it or hate it design. My first encounter with an Airflow was last year at the Revs Institute, at Miles Collier's Revs Institute in Naples. They have at Revs a four-door limousine sedan that is 100 points impeccable, and Donald Osborne did a design study on the car for us as a group and walked through some of the incredibly forward-thinking design elements of this car. I fell in love with it that day, and I learned to love it. I'd always not had any interest in Airflows before that, but understanding the revolutionary technology that went into this car at the time, it's really representative of the innovation of the 30s for an American car company.
You're really looking at this car as an object more than a car. I mean, I know you love to drive your cars and your motorcycles. I can't imagine you're thinking about the sheer pleasure you'd get from being behind the wheel here.
So, Keith, I'll tell you, I actually, prior to this Zoom call, I had a discussion with Scott George at Revs, and he said that they're actually the Coupe is very rare. There's, I think, 9 of them left, 1934s that are left. And they're actually quite pleasurable to drive because they're pretty advanced for their time. So obviously it's a 30s car, Keith, so it's not something you're going to be driving down the highway in. But I think I would drive one if I had it.
Philip, what attracted you to this particular car?
So this particular car, first of all, the color is really period correct. The restoration on this car is over the top. I mean, whoever spent the money really went to the end of the earth. Scott looked at the car as well and noted some very, very detail-oriented restoration aspects of it. This car is done completely right. It's a coupe. The color is period correct. And it's a 34. So what happened is they didn't sell well because they were so revolutionary. And the 35, which they also have one for sale at Worldwide, they toned down the grille. They tried to make it look more conventional. So the 34 is really the one to own. And the coupe is either the coupe or the extended wheelbase limousine is the one. That's what Miles has at Revs. But I like the coupe.
So, Philip, let's back up a second. This is for sale by Worldwide?
Yes.
And when is their auction coming up? Do you have it there? It's Labor Day weekend, I think.
I believe it's Labor Day weekend, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And if you put this car in your garage next to all your late model German supercars, why would you tell people you had it?
Because I have an affinity for the advances that were made in the 30s. If you think about the 1930s, this period of a total global depression, and we had all these incredible innovations that were occurring during that period, from radio to the automotive industry. I mean, that's when Packard was churning out these 12-cylinder high-tech cars at the time. I love the era of the 30s for mechanical things.
Where do you see the market range for this car, Philip?
So, I think it's going to be a pretty broad range. It's going to be depending on the bidders, but I think on the low side, this car is going to go for $125,000. And I think because of its rarity and its condition and its color being completely period correct, I think it'd go for at least $225 on the high end.
Do you have some values, some comps that would support that kind of rate?
No, the comp situation on these cars is nil. But I did speak to some experts, and I did speak with Scott at Revs, and we both sort of landed in the same place here.
So $1.25 to $2.25.
Yeah, I think it's going to go for $2.25.
All right,
it's that good a car.
Steven, your last pick.
1928 Bugatti Type 35C Grand Prix car, which is the last lot in the Gooding auction here, and I'm not not a huge fan of pre-war cars because I don't, it's just not my era, but I've had the fortunate, um, you know, business opportunity to sell a couple of Bugattis over the years, one a Type 35A and one a Type 35B. And the C is the big brother. It's the 2-liter V8 supercharged car. This is just a monster thing from the period. It's got great history. It's had 3 owners since I've been alive. In the last 62 years, it's had 3 owners, sorted and vetted by everyone. This is a thing that the estimate is about 3 million pounds. This is the one car, along with the other Bugatti, is the premier car in the auction. But this is the one I could see having. I mean, it is just amazing. And compared to period Bentleys, Vauxhalls, even to some of the Alfas, I just have a real soft spot for these cars, the way they're engineered. And I think if you wanted a halo car for a pre-war collection, this is going to be a real opportunity. And I think this is the one car that just may blow the roof off its estimate.
So explain, you're talking this car is about $5 million US estimate. So why is it?
No, it's just under 4, but I could see it going to 5.
Why is this car so much less expensive than an Alfa 8C 2300? Or, I mean, where does the value pointer, why does it end up coming at this number for this car?
The Alfa is sort of the Ferrari GTO of the period, and this may very well be the short wheelbase. So the Alfa is more successful, really ran it in a slightly different class, and is truly the big brother. I mean, you could really, the better comparison to this is a 1750, but I'd rather have this, and I'd rather have this than a big Bentley because they're just so much more nimble. I mean, there's a huge art and skill to driving it, and it's not for somebody just getting into collecting cars. But I think you have the 8C, Keith, and I think you have this parked next to it.
So, Steve, I had the chance to drive, I think it was the 50th anniversary tour. The Bugattis came here and drove from Laguna Seca down to L.A., and they put me in one of those cars, and I will say that the owners of those cars are the biggest driving fools I have ever met in my life. I mean, they had the crankshaft out of one of the cars in the night, and they just could not be stopped.
No, the Bentley. I got to give it to the Bentley guys and the Bugatti people. They don't own their cars to polish them and get awards. They generally, both groups, drive them like they stole them every single time they're in them. And when you see a Bentley tour, you can see it coming from 2 miles away because it looks like a squadron of airplanes. And the Bugattis are a little more stealth. They're really a different animal altogether. And I think Ettore Bugatti's famous quote was that W.O. Bentley made the fastest trucks on the road. Is the big slap in the face. But I think this car could be one of the cars talked about from the whole year being sold.
So let's talk about it again. What's the catalog estimate?
3 million pounds. And I think it could do 3.5 to 4. I think this is one of the cars that will go over.
Okay. We will watch that now. Philip?
Well, on the other end of the spectrum, we have a 1999 Mercedes C-Class AMG. This car
that's the other end of the spectrum.
Philip,
it really is.
Which auction is this from?
So this is RM.
This is okay. Come here.
Yeah.
So this is your modern day Bugatti, right?
Well, not quite, Keith. But here's why this car is interesting. Okay. So I've had some seat time in this car. It's a C class, right? So it's sort of a nothing car on the outside, but when you peel back the onion, it has a V8 AMG hand-built motor in it. Okay, it is incredibly fast. It's a light car. It is incredibly well balanced. It is incredibly fun to drive. These cars there's not many survivors. Just stop there and look at the condition of these photos. This car had zero preparation by RM for this auction. It is filthy. The floors are dirty. The engine compartment is a mess. Leads me to think that this is actually a pretty original survivor car. It has under 20,000 miles. Dean Lumbach would take this car and make it into a diamond. This car is, I think, undervalued in the market. In 1999 was the year that AMG took Mercedes took a controlling interest in AMG, so it's sort of a pivotal point in that history. This car is really, really interesting to me. If you're an AMG Mercedes guy.
Steve, Philip, how do you? I was going to ask Keith if you don't mind. Philip, how do you compare this to a 500e or an E500? Because I'm fond of them, having owned one of those.
Yeah, I own a 500. This is we're kindred spirits that way, Steve, right? But this is not of the same level as a 500e. This is an economy car with an AMG V8 in it. It does not have the build quality of the W124 series, particularly the build quality of the 500e, which was built at Porsche. The manufacturing story behind this car is not as interesting, although it is a true AMG car in the sense of a hand-built AMG motor. I just like it because I think it is a bargain. I think this car is not going to sell it won't sell for more than $20,000 on a good day because it's not presented well. They haven't done any work to make this car look special. It has mileage on its side. I don't know the history. There's not a lot of details on service records, but someone like Dean would make this car a 10. And I think for $20,000, you're getting into a pretty low production, very fun to drive, historically significant, arguably historically significant AMG car, even though it's the cheapest car they ever built. It is the spiritual successor to the 190E 16 valve in a lot of ways. And I think it's a great buy for the money.
Do you think part of the challenge with value is that there's not a lot of swagger for a C-Class?
Yeah, that's a huge issue. Like if you look at this compared to a 190 16 valve, right? You have the whole Senna history. It's got a Cosworth story behind it, pretty low production. This car doesn't have that, but still, I go back to the driving experience of this car. I mean, this is a car you can drive the wheels off of. And it is a sleeper on the stoplights, and it's a sleeper on top speed. I mean, it's a real performance car. I mean, a V8 in that little chassis, and it's tuned. The suspension's great. The cockpit's tight. The seats are bolstered. I mean, it's a 10, and it's totally underappreciated.
I'm going to take 1 second here to do a shameless plug for Sports Car Market. To subscribe to Sports Car Market, we can get you the SCM Live deal. You go to sportscarmarket.com/Zoom, and that you take 25% off. It makes it about $54, which is less than $5 a month. This deal is good now. It's good for the next few months. You can give it to your friends. Sportscarmarket.com/Zoom. This episode will be posted to our YouTube channel, sportscarmarket.com. You can go there. You can see our previous episodes as well. You can see what Bill Noom from Symbolic Motors said about the Lancia Aurelia Spider that he has for sale. And he said, Steve, that he thought it would bring somewhere between $800,000 or $900,000 and $1 million. So you guys are on the same plane here. So if you were to pick one of these cars, let's say you had all 6 to pick from, I'll finance it. The deal is 100% down and no payments. So Philip, you go first. Which car would you take? What would you pay for it? And why is it the one you picked?
I get the Bugatti thing, Steve, I get it. But I really would love to have that SC, the red car at Gooding. I think I'd pay into the 400s for it. I think it's going to sell for over 500,000, and it should. But that's my pick, Keith.
Okay, Stephen.
Well, I'm taking the Aston. I'm spending $10 million of your money, and I'm taking the Aston. I could use it more than the Bugatti. If I lived in the UK and had access to Goodwood and every other event that people do all over Europe, I'd take the Bugatti, but I don't, and I'm not going to anytime soon. So I'll have the Aston and drive it as often as possible.
So let me ask you one other question then before we close up here. which of these cars, if you had it in your garage, you would walk out and every night look at it and go, God damn, I'm the luckiest guy on the planet?
Same answer. Yeah, same answer.
And you,
I would say probably the Bugatti for me, because that's just such an iconic car.
listen, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us today on our first episode of SCM Live on the Radar, talking about cars that are coming up for auction or that are for sale by private treaty. This episode will be posted to the Sports Car Market YouTube channel. We look forward to seeing you in our next episode. Farewell, everyone.